There's a brutal truth about the world of celebrities, one that hits harder the longer you sit with it. Fame doesn't protect anyone from time, pressure, or devastating mistakes. Those stage lights burn so intensely they can blind both the audience and the star, forcing the darkness behind a legendary image far out of view. But when the lights finally fade, what's left is often just a human being who's been slowly worn down to nothing. There were faces that once made the entire world stop and stare. Bodies overflowing with energy, commanding the stage in ways no one else could. But when the music faded and the cameras turned away, the damage became impossible to hide. Ruthless and unforgiving, health failing, minds unraveling, lives sinking into pain. And nothing reveals that collapse more clearly than the way their appearance tells the story before they ever speak. The stories you're about to hear are living proof of that reality. 17 black celebrities, once symbols of beauty, pride, and power, names inseparable from success, who fell so far that they became unrecognizable, reduced to shadows of who they once were. Little Willie John. Little Willie John. A blazing soul prodigy, burned down to ashes behind ice-cold prison walls. Little Willie John was the kind of name that could silence a room with a single note. A true pioneer of soul, he exploded onto the scene young, armed with a silky smooth voice, undeniable stage magnetism, and the immortal hit Fever, a song that scorched the charts and sealed his legacy. Even as a kid, he commanded the stage like he was born under the spotlight, every note dripping with confidence far beyond his years. From the outside, his life looked like a straight shot to greatness. Fame came fast, applause came easy. But behind those blinding lights lurked a relentless downward spiral. Raised in a large family, moving from Arkansas to Detroit, Willie was performing long before he knew how to protect himself from the pressure. Alcohol followed him city to city, tour to tour. His temper flared hotter with every drink, harder to hide, harder to control. The stage gave him glory, but it also pulled him into endless nights of chaos. Then, in 1964, during a show in Seattle, everything shattered. A bar fight. Too much alcohol. A moment of rage. One impulsive stab, one man dead. Little Willie John, barely 5'6", was suddenly at the center of a murder case that stunned the nation. In 1966, the fall was complete. Convicted of manslaughter, he was sentenced to 8 to 20 years in Washington State Penitentiary. The door to freedom slammed shut like a trapdoor beneath his life. Behind bars, Little Willie John was no longer a celebrated soul singer, just another inmate. He clashed with guards, lived under constant tension, and watched his health collapse. Seizures came more frequently. His lungs weakened. His body stayed exhausted, beaten down by stress, neglect, and violence. Photos from prison are haunting. His once bright face now gray and hollow, eyes sunken and vacant, hair brittle and wild, a trembling body reduced to skin and bones. Isolation and illness consumed him piece by piece. The glow of the boy who once left audiences breathless vanished without a trace. On May 26, 1968, Little Willie John died behind bars at just 30 years old. Official cause, a heart attack. But questions never stopped. Violence, sickness, indifference, perhaps all of it together sealed his fate. When that cell door closed for the final time, what remained was a broken body, unrecognizable from the young star who once had America wrapped around his finger. His life ended in silence, leaving behind the ache of a talent that burned too bright, too fast, and then faded into dust. Mary Wells. Mary Wells, Motown's dazzling first queen, slowly faded into illness and poverty. Once the brightest face of Motown's early rise, she was crowned the label's very first queen. One song was enough to seal her legacy, My Guy. That sweet, unmistakable voice grabbed you from the very first note and never let go. Her career skyrocketed alongside Smokey Robinson, launching her straight into superstardom. But in 1964, everything began to slip. Leaving Motown wasn't just about ambition, it was fueled by a broken marriage and dangerously bad advice. Walking away from the house that built her shine, Mary chased bigger contracts, believing they would secure her future. Reality hit hard. New deals failed. Fans drifted away. Records came and disappeared just as fast, followed by long stretches of silence. By the late 1960s, the spotlight no longer called her name. Money dried up. Hope followed. Cigarettes turned from habit into addiction, 2 packs a day for decades. That priceless voice grew raspy, fragile. The warnings were ignored. In 1990, the diagnosis arrived: laryngeal cancer. Surgery to remove her voice box took away the one thing that still connected her to her glory days. Mary Wells lost her voice forever, a singer with no song. Financially, she collapsed. No health insurance. No steady income. Savings vanished. Her home was sold, her apartment foreclosed. She drifted through the final years, surviving on quiet help from friends in the industry and small fundraisers just to continue treatment. Her body changed until she was barely recognizable. The once round face became deeply lined, eyes darkened by exhaustion. Hair thinned and grayed too soon. Cancer swelled her throat, distorting her features. Skin and bones. Ribs visible beneath fragile skin. A haunting contrast to the woman who once held audiences spellbound. On July 26, 1992, Mary Wells died in a Los Angeles cancer hospital as the disease spread to her lungs. Her passing marked the tragic end of a journey from Motown royalty to a life undone by illness, bad choices, and poverty. When it was over, all that remained was the heavy story of a star who once stood at the very top, then quietly faded away in the dark. Paul Williams. Paul Williams, the beating heart of the Temptations, was slowly crushed by illness and despair. He wasn't just another member, he was the soul of the group, the man who built the choreography that had America glued to their TVs. That warm baritone, those rock-solid dance moves, that commanding presence. During the group's golden era, Paul was the irreplaceable anchor that held everything together. In the early days, Paul stepped onto the stage tall and razor-sharp, bright eyes, a smile that locked audiences in place. He sang, he led the dancing, he kept the group tight through endless tours and grueling nights on the road. But almost no one knew that behind the spotlight, a childhood disease was already eating him alive. Sickle cell anemia quietly tore through his body, sending waves of pain, sometimes dull, sometimes unbearable, turning even rest into a battle. Stage after stage. Tour after tour. By the late 1960s, Paul began leaning on alcohol just to survive the pain. The man who once drank milk now lived with a bottle in his hand. His toned body softened, his gut grew, his skin turned sallow. Those once sharp eyes became dull and glassy. His hair thinned, then grayed far too early. Eventually, the glamour of the stage could no longer hide the collapse. Trouble stacked up fast. His marriage crumbled under cheating scandals. Taxes piled up. Money slipped through his fingers. Inside the group, his role shrank. The signature choreography, his pride, was handed to Charlie Atkins. The man who once led from the front now stood in the back, pushed aside, drowning in hopelessness. In 1971, Paul Williams left the Temptations. He still received a consultant salary, but the title was gone. The spotlight was gone. The stage was gone. In his final years, the physical decline was brutal and impossible to ignore. His face twisted from constant pain. His body trembled, frail and worn. He looked decades older than his age. The legendary dance leader now walked heavy, as life slowly drained away. On August 17, 1973, after an argument with his girlfriend, Paul Williams was found dead in a car in an alley near the Motown building. A bullet to the head. Police ruled it a suicide born of despair, but strange details sparked rumors. 2 shots fired, only 1 hit. A broken bottle on the left side. Paul was right-handed, yet the wound was on the left. Whatever the truth, Paul Williams' life ended in heartbreak, a tragic fall of a man once thought untouchable. James Carr was a soul genius whose gift slowly withered under the weight of depression and crushing loneliness. His voice, deep, aching, and painfully honest, could stop a listener cold. When The Dark End of the Street was released in 1967, it didn't just become a hit, it became a confession set to music. Few singers could pour raw pain into a song the way James Carr did, and the mark he left never faded. At his peak, Carr was striking: sharp features, bright eyes, and the unmistakable aura of a man born to sing heartbreak. In the studio, he was unpredictable. One moment explosive, overflowing with emotion, the next, terrifyingly still. Bipolar disorder followed him everywhere, hurling his moods sky-high, then slamming them into darkness. Sessions were abandoned. Hours passed in silence as Carr sat motionless, leaving producers unsure whether to wait or walk away. By the 1970s, the illness had tightened its grip. Severe depression led to heavy medication. His body began to change. His skin dulled, his eyes lost their light. The emotional sensitivity that once fueled his legendary vocals became a curse he could no longer carry. In 1979, while touring Japan, James Carr finally reached his breaking point. On stage, he froze, no movement, no voice. The hall fell into an eerie silence. That night, he overdosed on antidepressants. He survived, but something inside him did not. From then on, Carr drifted through life almost unconsciously, moving between nursing facilities. Time slowed. His body shrank and curled inward. His skin turned ashen, his eyes blank, his hair white and untamed. The man who once made audiences weep now looked like a ghost of himself. In the late 1980s, a book by Peter Guralnick sparked a small, fragile recovery, but it came too late for a return to the stage. James Carr spent his final years in a quiet Memphis nursing home, his face hollow, body frail, the spark of genius long extinguished. On January 7, 2001, he died of cancer, bringing to an end a life slowly worn down by mental illness, long after the music had faded. Weldon Irvine. Weldon Irvine, a brilliant jazz-funk visionary and quiet mentor, was ultimately swallowed by a deepening mental darkness. A master musician, he wrote more than 500 songs, played piano with explosive soul, and worked alongside legends like Nina Simone. Behind the scenes, he shaped an entire generation of hip-hop artists, including Q-Tip, leaving an undeniable imprint on music history without ever standing in the spotlight. Early on, Weldon looked unstoppable. Sharp features, a strong frame, a clean afro, he carried himself with purpose. Raised in poverty, he grew up watching his father struggle as a musician while money stayed scarce. He brushed against drugs at a young age but pulled himself back through music. Years of relentless work built a massive catalog, yet shady contracts meant the royalties never truly came. By the late 20th century, financial pressure crushed him. More than $200,000 in federal tax debt loomed overhead. He felt used, discarded, forgotten. Depression wrapped itself tightly around him. Stress hollowed out his body. The once bright face turned pale and deeply lined, eyes sunken from sleepless nights and constant worry. His neat afro grew thin and wild. His body became frail and unsteady, unrecognizable from the fiery pianist he once was. In the early 2000s, Weldon was still playing small gigs, quiet, humble, almost invisible. Just days before his death, he performed in a cramped room with no crowd, no applause, no glory. Some believe that stark contrast broke something inside him. He wrote farewell letters to friends and family, saying he was exhausted and couldn't fight anymore. On November 9, 2002, a single gunshot ended his life outside an office building in Manhattan. By then, he already looked like a man shattered. His face was hollow, carved by stress, his eyes empty of hope. Nothing remained of the mentor who once lifted an entire generation, only the silence left behind. D. Clark's once sweet tenor slowly slid into the shadow of a man unrecognizable. In the early 60s, D. Clark possessed one of the most sought-after voices in pop music. His 1961 gold record Raindrops dominated the airwaves, and for a brief, blazing moment, he was the shining face of VJ Records, the embodiment of a generation raised on tender, emotional ballads. Young, handsome, flashing a confident smile with a fit, polished image, he lit up the stage. That soaring voice hooked listeners from the very first note. But fame is fragile, and the spotlight never stays forever. In 1966, VJ Records collapsed into bankruptcy, and D. Clark's career went down with it. He bounced from one small label to another, releasing new music that never caught fire. The hits stopped coming. His name vanished from the charts. Bookings dried up. Money disappeared. By the 1970s and 80s, Clark's life was in free fall. Alcohol became his constant companion. Cocaine soon followed. Everything he once owned was gone, debts piled higher, and the once charming face grew hollow, eyes dull, body wasting away. The singer who once ruled the radio was now alive but forgotten, broke while still breathing. Then tragedy struck again. In 1987, a massive stroke paralyzed the right side of his body. His health collapsed rapidly. Half his face sagged, his eyes no longer aligned, one side of his body withered. Every movement became agony. He lived alone in a cheap motel in Smyrna, Georgia, buried under crushing medical bills. Even then, he tried to sing. He took tiny gigs for spare change, stepping on stage with a twisted body and shaky legs. His hair was white and unkempt, skin deeply wrinkled, mouth pulled crooked by the stroke. The sight shocked those who remembered the star he once was. On December 7, 1990, D. Clark died of a heart attack in a hospital room. No fame, no fortune, no crowd waiting. His story ended not in applause, but in silence and total loneliness. Linda Jones. Linda Jones. A soul diva silenced in the middle of illness, pressure, and unfinished dreams. Linda Jones was a soul singer with a towering, emotionally charged voice that cut straight through the heart. She made her mark with the 1967 smash Hypnotized and the unforgettable Your Precious Love. Her career was painfully short, but her sound was anything but small. Once you heard her, you never forgot her. On stage, Linda was radiant. Young, confident, magnetic. A sexy presence, a fearless attitude, and a voice that exploded with raw feeling, thick, aching, and powerful. She looked unstoppable. But behind the spotlight, she was fighting a battle few could see. Diabetes had followed her since childhood. Doctors warned her to slow down. She refused. The music came first. Relentless touring, packed schedules, sleepless nights, her body paid the price. By the late 1960s, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Her skin turned yellowish, her eyes sank deep, her weight swung wildly. She was always exhausted, always pushing through. Part dedication, part fear. Fear that if she stopped, the world would move on without her. Managing her blood sugar became nearly impossible under the brutal pace of life on the road. In early 1972, the decline came fast and unforgiving. Her face grew hollow, lips pale, steps unsteady. Her body trembled beneath the glittering stage outfits that could no longer hide the damage. Still, she kept performing. She even took the stage at Harlem's Apollo, the sacred temple of soul. Then, between two shows on March 21, 1972, Linda Jones collapsed into a diabetic coma. Exhaustion and uncontrolled blood sugar had finally pushed her beyond the edge. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Time moved quickly, and life slipped away just as fast. Her face drained of color. Her eyes stopped responding. That night, at just 27 years old, Linda Jones was gone. No more stage lights. No second chance. No time to finish her dreams. She left behind 3 young children and a massive, aching void in soul music. Linda Jones burned bright and fell hard. From an explosive, heart-shaking voice to total collapse in only a few years. The lights went out far too early, leaving behind regret, sorrow, and a legacy that still echoes in the hearts of anyone who ever heard her sing. Billy Preston. Billy Preston, the keyboard legend who burned down to ashes in addiction and scandal. Once hailed as the fifth Beatle, his fingers helped define classics like Get Back and Let It Be, before he exploded as a solo star with the 1974 smash Nothing from Nothing. The world saw undeniable genius. But behind the spotlight was a life already fractured. As a child, Billy had a bright smile, a towering afro, a powerful build, and was thrust into music at an impossibly young age, surrounded by fame, flashing lights, and roaring crowds. Yet beneath it all, he carried silent wounds. He was abused. He grew up feeling different, misplaced, and alone. In a time when society rejected gay men outright, Billy lived split in two, desperate to hide, desperate to escape. By the 1980s, drugs took hold. First heroin, then cocaine. Each addiction carved deeper lines into his face. His skin turned ashen. Dark rings swallowed his eyes. Teeth fell out. The strong body that once filled stages became little more than skin stretched over bone. His money vanished. Bankruptcy hit more than once. And still, the fall continued. In 1998, he was convicted of insurance fraud after setting fire to his own home. The man who once stood beside the Beatles now stood before judges. Then in 2002 came another blow, charged with sexually assaulting a teenager. His reputation was shattered beyond repair. Desperate, Billy drifted into homelessness, sleeping in abandoned buildings. His health collapsed. His spirit followed. Every physical decline felt like another knife twisting into what was left of his pride. His face contorted in pain. His body curled inward. His eyes hollow, empty. There was nothing left of the keyboard wizard who once set crowds ablaze. In 2006, an overdose pushed him into a coma, his kidneys failing, his body unmoving for months. Just a shell. On June 6th, Billy Preston died alone in an Arizona hospital, while the world that once celebrated his brilliance barely remembered the glory he gave it. Mabel King. Mabel King, the radiant mama. A woman who once filled rooms with warmth and laughter, slowly crushed by illness and loss. Mabel King was a familiar and beloved TV presence. Audiences knew her as Mama Thomas on What's Happening, and as Eveline in The Wiz on Broadway and on film. She brought power, humor, and heart to every role. At her peak, Mabel was full-figured, joyful, and magnetic. Her enormous stage energy was rooted in gospel, sharpened in Harlem clubs, and carried a deep, unmistakable warmth that audiences never forgot. But behind the laughter, type 2 diabetes was quietly destroying her body. In 1986, the first complication struck. She lost a toe. Still, she kept working, still smiling for the public, even as her body began to betray her. Between 1989 and 1992, everything collapsed. Massive strokes left her partially paralyzed, robbed her of speech for over a year, and ended her career almost overnight. She was placed in long-term care at the Motion Picture and Television Home in California. Then came the cruelty no one saw. In 1991, her left leg was amputated. 3 years later, the right. 6 months after that, an arm. Her body was reduced piece by piece, shrinking over time. Skin wrinkled. Her face hollowed. The warm, comforting image of Mama faded inch by inch. Her final years were filled with relentless pain. Confined to a wheelchair, she suffered brutal falls that shattered her teeth. In 1998, she barely survived a hip replacement. The pain never stopped, not even in sleep. Her body was deformed, her face twisted by suffering. The once vibrant, joyful woman was now only a shadow of the star who had brought laughter to millions. On November 9, 1999, Mabel King died from complications of diabetes, alone, in pain, and cold. A heartbreaking end for a woman who gave so much joy to the world. James Crawford. James "Sugar Boy" Crawford. A New Orleans R&B star whose body and destiny were shattered by brutal violence. Sugar Boy Crawford left an undeniable mark on New Orleans music. He co-wrote the legendary Jacquemus, later reborn as the Mardi Gras standard Eco Eco. Rising from local stages to Chess Records and other labels, his career burned bright and fast. In 1954, Jacquemus exploded across New Orleans. He played trombone, fronted his own band, toured, recorded, and looked every bit the future of R&B, young, glowing, strong, eyes blazing with ambition. Songs like You Gave Me Love pushed him to the edge of real fame. The future seemed wide open. Then came 1963, and everything collapsed. While touring to Monroe, Louisiana, during the height of the Freedom Riders era, his band bus was stopped by state troopers. James was dragged out and beaten nearly to death with guns, for the crime of being a black man driving a nice car. That night ended with a cracked skull, a motionless body, and a future torn apart. A coma followed. A metal plate in his head. Severe brain damage stole his memory, his reflexes, and his ability to perform. 2 endless years passed in hospitals. When he finally woke up, he was no longer Sugar Boy. His face sagged, his mouth twisted, his eyes went vacant. His hands shook, his walk was crooked, his hair turned gray too soon. He was visibly disabled. Music abandoned him, cruelly. No more studios. No tours. No lights. By 1965, he was forced to quit construction work and opened a small locksmith shop just to survive. After 1969, music lived only in church, clinging to fading echoes of who he once was. Rare later appearances, like Jazz Fest in 1996, revealed a completely different man, thin, deformed, eyes hollow, nothing left of the Mardi Gras star. James Crawford lived on like that until the end. On September 15, 2012, he died in New Orleans after years of brutal headaches. Sugar Boy disappeared quietly, leaving behind the haunting image of an artist crushed not only by violence, but by injustice and racism. Etta James. Etta James. The blues queen who slowly destroyed herself through addiction and ruthless illness. Etta James possessed one of the heaviest, rawest voices ever heard in blues and soul. She could freeze the world with At Last, ignite it with Tell Mama, and break hearts with I'd Rather Go Blind. Raised in gospel, she hit major stages young and became an emotional force, revered for that deep, thick, unmistakable voice that carried both pain and power. But behind the glory, her life unraveled in the opposite direction. By the mid-1960s, at the peak of her career, heroin took hold. In 1966, she was arrested for writing bad checks. Her songs still played on the radio, but her personal life was cracking apart. In 1973, she was busted again for heroin. Rehab after rehab failed, leading to forged prescriptions and petty theft, anything to feed the addiction. Her husband, Artis Mills, served 10 years in prison for her, paying a devastating price for mistakes she could never undo. In 1974, Etta was locked inside Tarzana Psychiatric Hospital for 17 months. She came out, but never clean. Methadone mixed with heroin replaced sobriety. By 1978, while touring with the Rolling Stones, cocaine entered the picture, and her body began collapsing faster. Sharp features swelled, then turned gray. Dark rings framed her eyes. Her hair thinned and fell away. First, she became rail-thin. Then the weight spiraled completely out of control. In her later years, the decline was impossible to ignore. Her weight soared past 400 pounds. A gastric bypass in 2002 dramatically altered her appearance, but her health continued to fail. By 2008, Alzheimer's began erasing her memories. In 2011 came leukemia, hemorrhage, kidney failure. Tours were canceled. The stage went dark. Her final years were spent in a nursing home, broken, isolated, fading. The woman who once silenced concert halls with a single note now lay curled up, face deeply lined, eyes empty from dementia. Nothing remained of the seductive icon, only a tired body worn down by illness and self-destruction. On January 20, 2012, Etta James died in Riverside. A brilliant life fused with brutality, leaving behind a voice that still haunts the world, and a legacy heavy with regret for everyone who ever heard her sing. Bobby Farrell. Bobby Farrell, the disco dancer who faded into a swollen, lonely shadow of his former self. He was the living face of disco's golden age, the electrifying lead dancer and frontman of Boney M, a group that sold millions with global anthems like Daddy Cool, Rivers of Babylon, and Rasputin. On stage, Bobby was pure fire, ripped physique, explosive moves, every spin igniting the crowd. In the late 70s, he was everywhere on European TV, bright-eyed, muscles flashing under the lights, a symbol of an entire dance floor era. But behind the curtain, his life was already out of rhythm. Though he was the soul of Boney M on stage, Bobby didn't sing on the records. Frank Farian did. That truth slowly cracked the illusion. By 1981, tensions boiled over. Bobby walked away quietly, and with that, disco glory slipped through his fingers. He tried to cling to the past with small tours, but the magic was gone. In the 90s, he returned under the name Bobby Farrell's Boney M, yet the image had changed. The once ripped body grew heavy. His stomach swelled, his skin dulled, and the fire in his eyes faded. His marriage collapsed in 1995. Alone in Amsterdam, he scraped by, touring not for fame, but for survival. By the 2000s, his health was failing fast. Constant shortness of breath, sudden chest pain. He kept performing anyway. The spotlight was gone, but the bills weren't. His appearance became almost unrecognizable: puffy face, swollen body, slow movements, the disco energy nearly drained. In late December 2010, during a gig in St. Petersburg, Russia, Bobby stepped on stage struggling to breathe. He pushed through, ignoring the warning signs. Every move took more than he had left. The next morning, December 29th, he was found dead in his hotel room, heart failure. From an explosive disco icon to a bloated shell of himself, Bobby Farrell died carrying the weight of a glory that had long slipped away. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman, the radiant soul diva whose velvet contralto hid a lifelong war with darkness. She was one of the rare voices to conquer both soul and Broadway, blending flawless technique with aching emotional depth. With timeless hits like You Know How to Love Me and Old Friend, and her role in Sophisticated Ladies, she was crowned the ultimate sultry contralto, elegant, powerful, unforgettable. But Phyllis's journey was never easy. She grew up in a suffocating home, an alcoholic father, a depressed mother, constant financial struggle. Trauma took root early and never let go. As her career rose, her inner battles deepened. The spotlight couldn't hide the violent swings of bipolar disorder. Long, crushing depressions followed. Alcohol and pills became temporary escapes from a mind that refused to rest. In the late 70s, her career exploded. By 1979, her music was everywhere, dominating the radio. On stage, she soared. Backstage, she was unraveling. Emotional breakdowns led to canceled shows, earning her a reputation as unreliable. Record labels lost faith. Though she scored another hit with Old Friend in 1986, her career remained unstable. Bookings dried up. Money vanished. Debt piled high. The industry turned cold, leaving her alone with illness and isolation. Her appearance reflected the collapse. The tall, glamorous diva faded into exhaustion and despair. Her weight climbed past 300 pounds. Her face grew puffy, her skin dull, her hair unkempt. The fierce eyes that once commanded stages became red, sunken, and tired. Every step felt like a fight. By the early 90s, she had hit rock bottom. Her boyfriend left. Shows were canceled one after another. She felt forgotten. Discarded. The mental weight became unbearable. On June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis Hyman took her own life in her New York apartment. She was found beside an empty pill bottle and a short note, ending the life of a soul diva in cold, devastating silence. Don Cornelius. Don Cornelius, the Soul Train King, reduced to silence by illness and a single bullet. He was the most powerful black figure in music television, the visionary who created and hosted Soul Train for decades, turning unknown performers into soul, funk, and R&B legends. From a Chicago radio DJ, he built an empire. Smooth, impeccable, commanding. In 1970, Soul Train began to roll. Bright lights, a blazing stage, thundering music. Don stood center frame in a razor-sharp suit, deep voice steady, eyes cutting through the room. He wasn't just the host. He was the symbol. But when the cameras shut off, cracks began to spread. By the 1980s, his marriages collapsed. One divorce, then another. A family quietly falling apart. In 1994 came a blow he never recovered from. His son attempted suicide. That pain followed him every day. The darkness clung to the man who once ran the entire show. Then the 2000s turned his own body against him. Years of diabetes, kidney failure, relentless surgeries drained him fast. Alzheimer's followed, stealing memories, erasing the world he had built. The man who once directed hundreds on live television began forgetting names, then himself. His appearance faded brutally. The tall, stylish icon aged frighteningly fast, skin grayed and wrinkled, eyes dulled, hair thin and white. His hands shook. His steps slowed. The power was gone. Just a sick old man, alone inside his house. Legal troubles closed in during his final years. Domestic violence charges, lawsuits, a third divorce. Whatever spirit he had left was crushed. Career finished. Glory gone. Family fractured. Memory shattered. Body failing. On February 1, 2012, inside his Sherman Oaks home, Don Cornelius ended it all. One loud gunshot in a cold, quiet house. Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, forever known as Lady Day, lay broken on a cold hospital bed, far from the spotlight that once adored her. A true jazz icon, her voice is etched into American music history through haunting masterpieces like Strange Fruit and God Bless the Child, recordings that still send chills down the spine. She rose from smoky Harlem clubs to become the aching, emotional soul of modern jazz. But Billie Holiday's life was never a bed of roses. Born into poverty, abused, and scarred by hardship, she collided with society's dark side at an early age. By the late 1930s, when Strange Fruit shocked the world in 1939, she stood at the absolute peak of her power. Rooms fell silent when she sang, lights blinding, audiences breathless. Yet behind the curtain, her body was already falling apart. In the 1940s, heroin wrapped itself around her life like a shadow she couldn't escape. In 1947, she was arrested for possession, sent to jail, stripped of her cabaret card, and banned from major venues. Her career went into free fall, and whatever money she made disappeared straight into addiction. The years that followed were a patchwork of small gigs, collapsing health, and a once magnificent voice growing painfully unsteady. By the early 1950s, the proud Lady Day was barely recognizable. Skeletal and shaking, breathing labored, her face distorted by illness and drugs, she was worn down by constant harassment and surveillance. Financial pressure crushed her spirit. Rehab after failed rehab brought no rescue. In 1959, she was admitted to Metropolitan Hospital in New York, suffering from cirrhosis and heart failure. Even on her hospital bed, there was no peace. Police arrived and handcuffed her for suspected heroin possession. Her tiny body lay nearly motionless, breath shallow, eyes empty, no stage, no applause, no glory. In her final days, Billie Holiday scarcely resembled the woman she once was: gray skin, hollow face, missing teeth, nothing left but bones and memories. She died on July 17, 1959, broke, alone, her bank account nearly empty. Lady Day was gone at just 44 years old, leaving behind immortal music and the brutal image of a legend crushed by addiction and the unbearable weight of fame. Theodore Wilson. Theodore Wilson, a charming comic actor slowly wasted away by heart disease. Once a warm, familiar TV presence, he was the lovable dad on Good Times, with memorable appearances on Sanford and Son, What's Happening, and countless other shows. Audiences trusted his smile. He felt safe, dependable, real. Raised in Chicago theater, Wilson had natural charisma and perfect comedic timing. By the 1970s, he was a sitcom favorite, a man whose career seemed solid and steady. But his life didn't collapse all at once. It bent, then cracked, then broke, piece by piece. In his early Hollywood years, work was constant. His schedule was packed. He was strong, full-bodied, always smiling, always moving. Yet a congenital heart condition followed him silently, waiting. In the 1980s came open-heart surgeries, at least 2 major ones. Each operation saved his life, but took something back. His body was never the same. Each recovery left him weaker. Stamina faded. Breathing grew heavy. Steps slowed. Alcohol and cigarettes became quiet crutches, first occasional, then daily. His body showed the damage. Skin dulled. His face lost its firmness. His eyes sank deep into dark rings, sometimes puffy, sometimes frighteningly thin. People noticed. By the late 80s, it looked like life itself was being drained from him day by day. As his health declined, so did his career. Roles dried up. Projects slipped away, some unfinished, others shut down completely. The man who once delivered laughter now fought a failing body in silence. That bright TV face grew worn. Features sagged. His stare looked empty, exhausted, like he had nothing left to hold on to. Then came 1991. Everything collapsed. A massive stroke. A deep coma. In a Los Angeles hospital bed, Theodore Wilson lay trembling, shrunken, his life slipping away. On July 21st, he died at just 47 years old. A comic who left quietly, his joyful screen legacy standing in painful contrast to the cruel, heartbreaking decline that marked his final years. Nell Carter. Nell Carter. A Broadway powerhouse brought down by illness and inner demons. Once, Nell Carter lit up Broadway and television alike. A rare double winner of both the Tony and Emmy Awards, she became a household name through Ain't Misbehaving and Gimme a Break. Rooted in gospel and jazz, her voice burst with soul, humor, and magnetic charisma. On stage and screen, she was unstoppable, radiant, fearless, unforgettable. But behind the applause, her world was quietly unraveling. In the early 1980s, right at the peak of her success, Nell suffered a devastating mental health crisis that nearly cost her life. Grueling production schedules and relentless pressure eroded both her body and mind. Cocaine slowly became part of her daily routine, first a crutch to cope with stress, then a chain dragging her deeper into despair. Rehab followed rehab, each attempt leaving her more fragile. Her weight spiraled uncontrollably. The once agile performer grew heavier, her face swollen, her skin dull, her movements labored. Diabetes struck hard and fast, bringing severe complications. At over 300 pounds, she underwent gastric bypass surgery in a desperate effort to survive. But her body never fully recovered. With each public appearance, the toll was unmistakable. As her health declined, so did her career. Roles disappeared. Income became unstable. Medical bills piled up. In 1995, she filed for bankruptcy for the first time. Years of hospital stays and financial strain battered her spirit. In 2002, she declared bankruptcy again. A once blazing career had faded into silence. In her final year, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Minor strokes, worsening heart problems, and crushing exhaustion drained what little strength she had left. The image was heartbreaking, no longer the vibrant, comedic force America loved, but a worn, fragile woman. Her face lined with pain. Her eyes dim. The spark that once made millions laugh was almost gone. January 23, 2003. Nell Carter died suddenly in her Beverly Hills home. Heart failure, complicated by diabetes. A quiet ending to a long and painful descent from the highest heights of fame. She left behind a deep sense of loss, a reminder of a talent that once filled the nation with laughter and joy. They had it all, fame, money, applause, but even that couldn't stop time, cruel fate, or personal demons. Perhaps stories like this remind us that the celebrity world isn't as glamorous as it appears. Behind the spotlight are struggles few ever see. If this story moved you or made you reflect, share it with us. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next videos, where we continue uncovering the dark truths hidden behind the glitter and fame few dare to confront.